Hey everyone, and welcome to Boston Autoblog. It was bound to happen. I had to give my own personal input on the Mk8 Golf. I have a lot of people asking me, DMing me, messaging me what I personally think about the new Golf 8, as they're calling it. And well, we're going to find out if I even like it or not. But also, I kind of want to reserve some of the judgment because, well, we're only getting the GTI and the Golf R, and that won't be coming out until next year and should have a different look to it than the regular Golf. So I kind of want to reserve all my thoughts on it right now, but let's get into initially what I think about the new Mk8 Golf. Now, with weather being garbage today, I figured why not do just an in-car video today because, well, it's fall, it's getting kind of the colder season, and this really doesn't require being outside to talk about the car anyway. So without wasting any further time, let's get right in this video. Now let's start off with the good. So the interior is probably the best part of the Golf, and I can only assume that we're going to get that in the GTI. Part of me thinks though that the interior is a bit overhyped because, well, the Mk7 GTI in the United States, we got analog gauges, whereas in Europe they got digital. So part of me is kind of feeling like, well, maybe the base model Mk8 GTI will get analog gauges like this generation, or the generation I'm in right now for the Mk7. And maybe the digital display would be maybe an SE or Autobahn trim, depending on how they're going to do the trims for the next generation. I personally think that that's a little bit overhyped. I don't think we're going to get all that on base trim because that would just be quite a lot of money in my opinion. I think you're probably looking at over $30,000 for a base model GTI if you had the digital display and the 10-inch touchscreen. But if you do get that, if that is standard, you're getting a 10-inch touchscreen and a 10-inch digital display, which I think looks amazing. Also, what they've done is that they're taking a lot of parts from Audi and Porsche. The thing I noticed the most was the gear shift lever. Right out of the Porsche 911, the new 992. I noticed that immediately. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. You can't be serious that the center console is the exact same thing out of the Porsche 911. Then also the buttons and even the vent layouts are really from Audis and newer Porsches. So I kind of like it from that regard. I like the fact that if I buy a Volkswagen GTI, if I buy the next model year, it would technically be a poor man's Audi and Porsche, which I'd have no problem with. I do joke around with my friends saying how the Mk7 GTI does share a few parts with Audi and how it's, you know, kind of like a base version of an Audi. But the Mk8 takes it to a whole nother level, and in my opinion, I think it's actually going to be a pretty cool car to sit in. Also, from what I'd seen from a video, and again, I can't assume this would be here for the United States market, but you're also going to have 3-zone climate control, which I actually like. I think that'd be pretty cool. You know, that's probably one of the minor complaints that some people have with the GTI is that there's no 3-zone climate control where competitors do offer that. Especially where if you're looking at getting an Autobahn trim at $35,000, you kind of expect that. So hopefully that is integrated into the next generation. Again, that's something I kind of don't want to overhype here because I do think that here in the United States, at least for base model trims, I still see an analog gauge and just regular 2-zone climate control, or maybe just single climate control up front. But then again, Volkswagen is changing the brand and going more premium with the vehicles that they're producing. So I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility that we see standard dual-zone climate control or maybe even 3-zone climate control. Another thing I noticed as well is that it seems like the interior is a little more roomy. There's a little more arm room. And I'm wondering if that has a lot to do with the fact they changed the center console because, like I said, it has that 911 look to it. They changed the entire dashboard. But at the same time, from what I've read from Road and Track, they didn't really change the dimensions that much for the next generation Golf. So I'm trying to figure out how they made a little more room. Maybe it's just the photos, maybe it's the way they took the photos. But from what I'd seen, it does seem like it's a little more roomy, which is definitely welcomed. I do feel a little claustrophobic in the Mk7 GTI. Even though I do love this car, I just think that having a little extra room would be nice. Now, the best part, though, and the thing that I like the most out of what we're hearing about the next GTI is the horsepower increase. So everything that we've heard and everything that we're expecting is 250 horsepower stock on the GTI. That would be a 22 horsepower increase from the Mk7.5, which would be pretty impressive. And then when you start looking at the TCR, that's 270 or 290, which we're most likely not going to get. But if we have the same horsepower to torque ratio, you're looking at somewhere around 290 to 300 pound-feet of torque, which I'd be really interested in seeing what the 0 to 60 times would be on the next GTI, because I think that'd be really impressive, and I think would be the seller or the selling point for the next GTI, because everyone's been on me about how, oh, the Hyundai Veloster N has more horsepower, it's quicker, and blah 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 blah. But with the new Mark 8, that kind of shuts that down, and I think the Mark 8 GTI, performance-wise, is going to be a lot better than the Hyundai Veloster. So in that regard, I think Volkswagen is moving in the right direction, not only when it comes to interior, but also horsepower. Now let's get into what's not so great about the Mark 8. But again, we need to reserve some judgment here because, well, we're getting the GTI. The GTI might look different in all aspects, just in terms of how it sits on suspension, and also it might have more of a masculine and more of a performance-oriented look. So we shouldn't really rush to judgment on this. But up front, it looks like an Arteon front end. It really does. And that's not a bad thing, because the Arteon, in my opinion, is the best looking Volkswagen that's really been out. I put that over the Phaeton. But on the Golf, those headlights just don't work. And I thought that they were going to go with the Jetta front end. And we saw that in the photos with the camouflage. And, well, I think people really jumped on Volkswagen for that. And then with the unveiling, they look like they're different headlights. And, well, it kind of looks like, to me, an Arteon up front, which would make sense because the Arteon is the flagship of the brand, or at least for the cars in the lineup. So that makes sense, just not 100% sure if I like that or not. Then coming around to the back, it kind of looks like a Tiguan from the rear end. And when you look at the vehicle from the side profile towards the rear, it kind of looks like a mini crossover. I really don't know why Volkswagen did that. But again, we are seeing a lot of that in the industry, because the Mazda 3 hatchback kind of looks like a mini CX-3 or a lower CX-3. So I think hatchbacks in the industry are going more towards this crossover look, or vice versa, whereas the crossovers are kind of becoming more like the hatchbacks. And what Volkswagen did, they gave the GTI or the Golf Tiguan taillights, and I'm not 100% sure if I like that or not. I think the rear end looked a little bit more traditional to the Volkswagen look, or at least the Golf look. It doesn't look too radically different than the Mark 7, but the taillights, though, are definitely off of a Tiguan, which I don't know if I'm liking that or not. However, once again, I do think we're really jumping to conclusions already, because if you look at where the photos were, and you look at the vehicle that they actually unveiled in Wolfsburg, that shade of yellow is awful. It doesn't look good on the Arteon, doesn't really look good on the Atlas. I have no idea why Volkswagen even wanted to unveil it in that shade of yellow, or with that color. However, there's been other photos circulating the internet from the same unveiling where there was red and white, and in red and white it looks really good, and a lot has to do with the fact that there's gloss black exterior accents, which I'm kind of hoping does make its way to the GTI. I think the gloss black goes really well on this car, and you know, the Mark 7.5 for the Rabbit Edition, you did get that gloss black look. You had the gloss black side mirrors and the wing, or the rear spoiler. And I think the gloss black works really well. That's why I was actually looking at getting a white Rabbit when I was looking at buying a GTI, just because I like that white and black contrast. So I'm hoping that that makes its way to the GTI as well. But from the angle that we saw on the white Golf 8 that was unveiled, I kind of liked it. I was digging the styling. I think that in certain colors, the Golf 8 or the Mark 8 GTI is going to look good. But it's that yellow that doesn't look good. I don't even know if it's going to look good in cornflower blue if they even decide to make it in that color. I think, if anything, Volkswagen should stick to traditional colors and kind of be more on the conservative side of things, just so that we can all kind of get used to this car. But again, I do think that once we start seeing it in person, maybe we'll start warming up to it. Cars never look good in photos. It's very hard to judge a car by looking at a photo on the internet. I really want to wait and see next year when maybe they start arriving at the dealerships, or if they do get unveiled before New York and they're at New York. I really want to check this vehicle out and see what it looks like, so that I can give more of a personal opinion, more of an accurate opinion. But there is a lot to take in with this new Golf 8 or Mark 8 GTI, because there's a lot that has changed. Again, I think the interior is the best part. Exterior, I'm not a big fan, but again, I want to wait and see what the GTI is going to look like. So guys, let me know what you think. Do you like the Mark 8 Golf? I think up front and rear end, I think a lot of people would agree that they don't like it. But bodyline wise, they kept it the same as the Mark 7. It doesn't look too different from the side profile. It's just really it's the front and rear end that I think if Volkswagen went with a slightly different look, people would have been all on board with this. But then again, let's remember one thing. It wasn't too long ago, back in 2014 when the Mark 7 GTI was unveiled, that there were people who didn't like that either. I remember seeing posts from Car and Driver and Road and Track, and there were comments that did not like the Mark 7 GTI. So I think this happens all the time. We get used to a generation, and then when you see the new changes, you're like, ugh, looks awful. But I think that maybe within 6 months, people will start warming up to the car, but who knows? I think Volkswagen GTI owners or enthusiasts are really all about tradition, and I don't know. I think the Mark 8 is just a little too crazy, a little bit too wild. But then again, I think Volkswagen had to move in that direction just because to kind of change it up, especially where now you have a whole new interior, and I think a change-up was needed to some degree. But then again, maybe it went too far. So guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe for more, and I'll see you guys next time.